My name is Jules Rivera, a third-year BFA student at Westwood School of Fine Arts, chasing the Westwood Art Scholarship that could decide whether I survive another semester or fold under the bills and tuition I can barely cover. And I have a rival that I completely hate. His name is Cassian Hale. And my major problem with Cassian Hale is that he thinks he's God's gift to art. The bigger problem? Half the class agrees with him. Even now, as I watch him gesture at his painting with a little bow, like he was presenting a miracle, and all I could see was a chaotic explosion of color slashed across the canvas, dripping down like it was bleeding its own drama. What mess. I wanted to capture movement, Cassian said, his voice smooth as glass. Not just how a body moves, but how it feels to move. The energy, the chaos. A couple of students nodded eagerly. Of course they did. Cassian could vomit on a canvas and call it raw expression, and they'd clap like seals. Professor Halden cleared his throat. Bold, but uncontrolled. You've overworked the center. The guy doesn't know where to rest. Cassian just smiled, as if being critiqued was part of his performance. Art isn't about rest, Professor. It's about disruption. The room laughed. I rolled my eyes so hard it hurt. And then, because the universe hates me, Halden called my name next. I carry my sketch up, clean, precise graphite lines of a dancer mid-pose, every muscle taut. No chaos, focus. Jules Rivera, Halden said, peering through his glasses. I'm impressive. Technically sound, looks like a study in restraint. I exhaled slowly. That was good. That was exactly what I was aiming for. But then Cassian's voice cut in, smooth and smug. Or maybe just boringly safe. There was a ripple of laughter after that. My jaw clenched. Halden frowned. Cassian. What? Cassian lifted his hands innocently. I'm just saying, Rivera's work is tidy. Pretty. But where's the soul? The risk? I turned, glare sharp enough to slice him in two. Not everyone needs to cover a canvas in blood to feel something, Vale. The class owed like we were on a playground instead of in an art studio. Cassian grinned at me. Lazy, infuriating. Better safe than sorry, right, Rivera? That's your motto. No. I shot back, heat rising in my chest. My motto is, some of us don't have the luxury of failing and still having daddy write the tuition check. The room went dead silent. Cassian's smirk faltered for just a second. A flash of something in his eyes. Anger? Embarrassment, before he laughed it off. Touché. He gave me a mock salute and sauntered back to his seat like he hadn't just been gutted in front of everyone. Halden pinched the bridge of his nose. If you two put as much energy into your work as you do into antagonizing each other, the scholarship committee would hand you both the award tomorrow. That shut us up, at least on the surface. But I could feel Cassian's gaze on me the rest of the class, hot and sharp, like a dare I refused to acknowledge. And after class, he cornered me. Careful, Rivera. All that bitterness is starting to age you. You'll end up sketching wrinkles on yourself. I spun around. Cassian leaned against the doorframe, blocking my way, his grin infuriatingly perfect. He always smelled faintly of turpentine and expensive cologne, like a mess wrapped in money. Move, I said flatly. Or what? You'll sketch me to death. He tilted his head, eyes glinting. Actually, I'd love to see how you draw me. All angles and shadows. Maybe you'd finally admit you can't stop looking. My ears burned. You're delusional. Cassian leaned closer, so close I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. His voice dropped, soft and dangerous. Maybe, but you're the one blushing. I shoved past him, heart pounding, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a retort. Behind me, his laugh echoed down the hall, rich and maddening. God help me if this guy wins the scholarship. I will never hear the end of it. He doesn't need it, he wants it. I'd overheard him at a party, saying it was his chance to finally prove himself, like life had been some cruel trial. He glided through campus in clothes worth more than all my textbooks combined. He wanted the recognition. I needed the security. That was why he got under my skin so much. I glanced at Adrian, my roommate, who was sprawled across the couch, absorbed in a game. I pressed harder with my pencil, almost tearing the paper. The still life I was drawing blurred into Cassian's grin, that lazy, arrogant smirk that made the world his stage and the rest of us mere extras. I hated him for it, and yet, a twisted part of me admired him. His boldness, his refusal to play safe. His art had teeth. It cut through the room, demanded attention. Mine was precise, careful, maybe too careful. But careful kept me afloat. Careful meant no wasted paper, no ruined canvases. Careful meant survival. Yo, you're scowling again. Adrian's voice drifted over. That means it's Vale. I snapped my sketchbook shut. Don't say his name like that. Adrian grinned without looking up from his screen. Like what? Like we're friends. The word tasted sour. He shrugged. Dude, I don't get it. You and Vale have been at each other's throats since freshman year. What did he even do? Kick your puppy? I hesitated. It wasn't one thing. It was everything. His smirks. His perfect hair. His effortless charm. The way Professor sighed but still looked at him like he was a golden boy, even when he turned in half-finished assignments. And the way, deep down, I was terrified he'd still beat me. You wouldn't understand, I muttered, standing to head back to our room. Adrian didn't press, but he called after me. Don't let him eat you alive, Jules. He's not worth it. I wanted to believe that. But the truth was, Cassian Hale was worth something. He was the obstacle between me and everything I'd fought for. And if I had to drag myself through fire to beat him, I would. Because I couldn't afford not to. Hey Daydreamers, thanks for tuning in. If you're liking this story so far, tell us where you're listening from in the comment section and hit the subscribe and notification buttons so you don't miss any story uploads. Let's continue. By morning the next day, I receive an email at 7:42 a.m., just as I was lacing my shoes for another half-dead sprint to my barista shift. Urgent. Mandatory meeting, department head. Attendance required. My stomach sank. Nothing good ever started with urgent. By noon, the whole art department was buzzing. Whispers in hallways. Heads bent over phone screens. A girl in my life drawing class looked at me like I had spinach in my teeth. What? I snapped. She bit her lip. You didn't hear? Hear what? She leaned in. Somebody posted on the department forum. Said one of your installations got trashed at the gallery prep last night. My chest went ice cold. What? It's all over Insta, she whispered, showing me her screen. And there it was, my installation piece, shards of glass, torn paper, splattered paint. Wrecked, like someone had stomped it flat. Hashtags bloomed beneath the photo. Hashtag art sabotage, hashtag scholarship drama, hashtag Vale versus winners. And right below that, another photo. This is one of Cassian's studio corners. His paint-splattered hands raised in mock surrender, the caption, "Not me though, eyes." I saw red. I'm going to kill him. By the time I stormed into the department head's office, Cassian was already there, slouched in a chair like he was posing for a goddamn magazine shoot. Winters, he drawled. Rough morning. I wanted to hit him. Professor McAllister cut in before I could. Enough. Both of you. Sit. I sat, but my body was all sharp edges. The professor steepled her fingers. There's been an incident. The gallery board is furious. They don't want the scholarship tied to a scandal. Especially not one that pits our two most competitive candidates against each other in the court of public opinion. It wasn't me, I said immediately. Cassian smirked. Of course not. You were too busy crying over your shattered masterpiece, weren't you? I snapped toward him. You think this is funny? Funny? No. Predictable? Absolutely. Vale, McAllister barked. Enough. Her glare flicked between us, sharp enough to cut glass. The board has given me one option to salvage this program. Since the two of you insist on making this rivalry public. She paused. My stomach dropped. You'll fix it publicly. Cassian arched a brow. Define fix. You will both lead the campus charity art gala. One project. You both will team up for it. I choked. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead serious, she said. The gala is in 6 weeks. If you fail, if there's one more incident, you're both disqualified from scholarship consideration. Permanently. The room spun. My hands curled in a fist on my knees. Beside me, Cassian leaned back in his chair, smile slow, dangerous. So, we're partners now. Congratulations, Winters. I turned to him, fury boiling in my throat. I'd rather drink turpentine. His grin widened. Kinky. Vale. McAllister slammed a folder on her desk. Enough. Get out. Start planning. And remember, your futures depend on it. I stood so fast the chair legs screeched. My pulse hammered in my ears as I stormed out. Cassian followed, whistling under his breath, like the whole world was one big joke he'd already won. In the hall, he caught up to me. Guess you're stuck with me, Winters. I didn't look at him. Couldn't. My chest was too tight, my teeth aching from how hard I clenched my jaw. But he leaned in anyway, voice a low murmur that curled hot against my ear. Try not to fall in love. He sauntered ahead, smug as hell. I swear I'm going to bash his head in someday. When I got to my dorm, I went straight to Adrian's room. He opened the door with a mouthful of Pop-Tarts, blinking at me. Bro, it's 2 p.m. Why do you look like someone murdered your cat? Close, I muttered, brushing past him into the chaos that was his room, Empty coffee mugs, crumpled sketches, a tragic attempt at laundry piled in the corner. Adrian flopped on a couch, gesturing with his half-eaten Pop-Tart. Spill. Did Vale finally challenge you to a duel at dawn? Because I pay to see you try fencing with paintbrushes. I dropped onto the armchair opposite him, dragging my hands down my face. It's worse. We're being forced to work together. That got his attention. He sat up, crumbs dusting his hoodie. Wait, what? I explained everything to him. Adrian whistled low. Damn. So basically, you're fake engaged. I groaned. Don't start. Oh, I'm starting. 'Cause you know what this is? He leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the kind of joy only chaos could bring. This is enemies to lovers bait. The fanfic writes itself. I grabbed the nearest throw pillow and chucked it at his head. He ducked, cackling. I hate him, I said through gritted teeth. I have hated him since freshman year. He's smug, he's manipulative, he's hot. Adrian cut in. Infuriating. And don't you dare. Hot, he repeated, grinning like the devil. I sat back, glaring. You're supposed to be on my side. Oh, I am, he said, munching the last bite of his Pop-Tart. I'm just also not blind. He was right. I wasn't blind to the fact that Cassian is indeed hot, but that doesn't stop me from hating him for being a jerk. It doesn't matter. He's still the worst person alive. And now I'm chained to him for 6 weeks. Adrian leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. Well, look on the bright side. Maybe you'll sabotage each other so hard, neither of you wins. Then you can cry into my Pop-Tarts forever. I shot him a look. Comforting. I try. He grinned. Then softer, but for real, Jules, don't let him see you sweat. That's what he feeds on, right? Your outrage? So starve him. Play it cool. Make him sweat. I exhaled, sinking deeper into the chair. Play it cool. Like I hadn't been replaying one stupid line in my head for the last 2 hours. Try not to fall in love. I hated that it made me shiver. The next day, we got started on the project immediately. I got there 10 minutes early, partly because I wanted to set the tone, and if I was already there, maybe, just maybe, I'd feel in control. I laid out my sketchbook, charcoal pencils, and one very specific glare that I planned to wear like armor. Of course, he waltzed in 15 minutes late. Winters, he said, like it was a private joke. Already nesting, I see. I clenched my jaw. You're late. He sauntered over, dropping his bag on the table with a heavy thud. I prefer fashionably delayed. Builds anticipation. You're not Beyoncé, I muttered. His grin flashed, quick and wolfish. You noticed. I flipped my sketchbook open, ignoring the way heat prickled up my neck. We're here to plan the charity piece, not audition for RuPaul's Drag Race. Cassian leaned over the table, too close, his cologne curling faintly between us. Don't tempt me. I'd slay. I glared at him, but he just smirked, tapping his fingers on my sketchbook like it belonged to him. So, what's your genius idea? Please don't say another broken glass and feelings installation. I think the world's had enough of your melodrama. My hand itched to smack him with a paintbrush. Instead, I snapped the sketchbook shut. At least I make people feel something. Unlike you, Mr. Pretty Colors and Wild Composition. His smirk softened into something sharper. Oh, I make people feel. You just don't like that you're one of them. My pulse thudded in my throat. I pushed back from the table. This is pointless. You're impossible. Cassian caught my wrist enough to stop me. His fingers were warm, calloused with paint and clay, and it burned through my skin like a brand. Impossible, he echoed, his voice lower now. Or exactly what we need to win. I froze. For a second too long, we just stood there, his smirk softening into something unreadable. Then, like he remembered who he was supposed to be, Cassian released me, stepping back with a careless shrug. Fine, he said. We'll brainstorm. Together. But you should know, he picked up a pencil, twirling it between his fingers, that cocky grin sliding back into place. I don't play fair. I swallowed hard, hating the way my pulse wouldn't slow down. Neither do I said, forcing steel into my voice. But when I sat back down and opened my sketchbook again, my hand shook just enough to smudge the first line. If someone had told me at the start of the semester that I'd be sitting across from Cassian Hale in the art studio without wanting to hurl a paintbrush at his head, I would have laughed. Or maybe cried. Probably both. But there we were, 2 weeks into this cursed partnership, sharing the same table littered with sketchbooks, color swatches, and empty coffee cups. The first week nearly killed me. Every idea I brought to the table, he shot down with that lazy smirk. Every sketch he slid across the table, I shredded with words sharp enough to draw blood. Our professor probably thought we were hopeless. I kept sketching the outline of a mural design we were supposed to pitch for the charity event, my pencil scratching lightly against paper. Cassian leaned back in his chair, spinning a brush between his fingers, eyes on me in that unnervingly direct way he always had. What? I finally snapped, glancing up. You've been staring for 10 minutes. You're either planning my murder or trying to copy my technique. His mouth curved, slow, and infuriating. Maybe I just think it's funny how serious you look. Like you're trying to solve world hunger with a few lines of graphite. I rolled my eyes, but the corner of my mouth betrayed me. It twitched. I pressed it flat quickly, pretending to check my lines. He noticed. You almost smiled, he said, tilting his head like a cat who'd cornered its prey. Delusion looks good on you, Vale. I smudged shading along the edge of my sketch, keeping my gaze fixed downward. But I couldn't deny it. He caught me off guard. Don't tell me I'm growing on you, he added, voice dipped in mockery but softer than usual. You're like mold, I muttered. Persistent, annoying, impossible to get rid of. He laughed. It wasn't cruel. It filled the room, warm in a way that unsettled me. The shift between tolerating Cassian and wanting to strangle him again came faster than I expected. I had continued working on a draft for the mural, adding intricate details, when Cassian leaned over, pen in hand, and, without asking, added a bold, dark line across the top. Excuse me, I said, freezing mid-stroke. He didn't even look guilty. It was off balance. The perspective didn't work with the composition. You're welcome. I blinked at him, heat crawling up my neck. You don't just draw over someone else's work, Vale. That's basic respect. Respect, he repeated, almost laughing. This is a joint project, Jules. If I see something wrong, I fix it. That's called teamwork. No, that's called being an arrogant prick. His chair scraped back, and suddenly he was standing over me, tall and bristling. Arrogant? Please. I'm the only reason this mural is even going to get approved. Your ideas are pretty sure, but they're safe. Forgettable. I'm giving this project teeth. I stood too, fists curling at my sides. And I'm the one keeping it from looking like a toddler's fever dream. You think chaos is art just because you can throw paint at a wall and call it expression? His eyes flashed sharp and cutting. Say that again. I should have walked away. I should have let it drop. Instead, I shoved his shoulder hard. Chaos isn't art, Vale. It's just noise. And maybe that's why you're so good at it. You've been nothing but noise since the day I met you. The punch came before I even realized he'd swung. My lips split against his knuckles, copper flooding my mouth. Shock froze me for half a second, long enough for him to mutter, shit, under his breath. Then I lunged. My fist caught his jaw, snapping his head to the side. He stumbled, cursed, and came back at me with a shove that knocked us both into the table. Paint splattered, canvases fell, and for a few seconds, it was nothing but fists, shouts, and the crash of supplies hitting the floor. I wasn't thinking, just years of rivalry, of biting words and swallowed fury, pouring out all at once. By the time we collapsed onto the paint-smeared floor, breathing hard, my knuckles ached, and his cheek was already bruising. We stared at each other, chests heaving, silence hanging heavy between us. Feel better, he rasped, spitting a little blood to the side. Not really, I muttered, wiping my mouth. My lips stung every time I spoke. We lay there for a minute, the overhead lights buzzing like the world hadn't just tilted sideways. Then, against all reason, I started laughing, low, broken, half hysterical. Cassian turned his head toward me, brow furrowed. You're insane. Probably, I said, still breathless. But so are you. Then we burst out laughing. And somehow, absurdly, it felt like the first honest moment we'd ever shared. Eventually, he pushed himself up and offered me a hand. I hesitated, then took it, his grip firm and warm despite the sting in my knuckles. Truce, he asked, voice quieter than usual. I studied him, the bruise blooming on his jaw, the sweat on his brow, the spark in his eyes that wasn't anger anymore. For now, I said, and just like that, the tension between us eased by a few degrees. I thought the fight would ruin everything, that the next time we sat down to work, Cassian would go back to sneering, I'd go back to snapping, and the mural would wither into something ugly and half-finished. But when I walked into the studio the next evening, Cassian was already there, alone, hunched over sketchpad. He was focused, with his shoulders bent low, pencil moving in careful strokes. He didn't notice me at first. I stopped in the doorway, just watching him as his hands moved differently than usual. It was slower and less dramatic as he drew lines that were too fragile and tender for his image. The page caught the light when he shifted, and for a second I saw it. Not bold, abstract chaos, but a small, unfinished portrait. A boy, maybe 10, maybe younger, with wide eyes and a crooked smile. The detail was breathtaking, each line sharp with affection. It didn't look like Cassian's work. I must have made a sound, because his head snapped up. His eyes met mine, startled, then shuddered in an instant. He slammed the sketch pad shut and leaned back in his chair like he'd been caught committing a crime. Enjoying the show, Winters? His voice was cool, but his jaw was tight. I set my bag down, keeping my tone even. Didn't realize you could draw like that. Like what? He asked too fast. Like I hesitated, searching for words. Like you actually care. For a second, something flickered across his face. Defensiveness, maybe shame, but then he smirked, slipping the mask back on. Don't flatter yourself. That wasn't for mural. Just warming up. Right, I said, even though I didn't believe him. We worked in silence for a while, sketching outlines on the big canvas. Every so often, I'd catch him glancing my way, like he was checking if I was going to say something else about the drawing. I didn't, but the image of that boy's face lingered in my mind. When I dropped my pencil for a break, I found myself blurting, "So, who was it?" on the page. Cassian didn't look up. No one. Didn't look like anyone. His pencil stilled, fingers tightening. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, he said, "My little brother." I froze. I never knew he had a little brother before. Cassian gave a humorless laugh. He's better at art than I'll ever be. Little genius. Guess it runs in the family. He tossed his pencil down and leaned back, stretching, trying to play it casual. Don't read into it, Winters. Not everything's a sob story. But the edge in his voice said otherwise. I didn't push. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since I'd met Cassian Hale, I realized he was more than the swagger and the smirk. Behind it was someone real, someone carrying weight he didn't want anyone to see. And against my better judgment, I felt something shift in me. The kind that keeps you looking closer, even when you know you shouldn't. I left him at the studio to get something to drink, and on getting back, halfway to the supplies cabinet, I heard Cassian's voice, sounding tense. I froze, half hidden by the doorframe. He was on the phone, pacing, his usual smooth confidence stripped away. Yes, I know the deadline, he snapped, but his voice wavered. I'm working on it, okay? What do you want me to do? Pull miracles out of thin air. A pause. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but whatever was said made Cassian's shoulder stiffen. I'm not lazy, he bit out. Don't say that. You think I wanted this? You think I like competing for scraps, just to prove I belong? He turned, and the light caught his face. The smirk was gone. In its place was raw frustration, sharp as glass. I'm not going to lose, all right? I won't. His voice cracked on the last word, so quiet I barely caught it. For a second, I almost stepped out, almost said something. But then his hand raked through his hair, and he let out a shaky laugh, bitter, not amused. Yeah, he said. Of course. If I screw this up, I'm out. You've made that clear enough. Don't worry. I'll win. I'll make sure he never gets the chance. He ended the call and just stood there, breathing hard, his phone still clutched tight. For once, he didn't look like the golden boy everyone else saw. He looked cornered, fragile. I shifted my weight, and the floorboard creaked. His head whipped toward me, eyes narrowing the instant he saw me. In a blink, the mask slid back into place, his mouth curving into that familiar, infuriating smirk. Enjoy the eavesdropping, Winters, he drawled. Or are you just stalking me now? I forced my expression blank, even though my chest felt tight. Didn't mean to interrupt. Just came for supplies. Sure you did. He slipped his phone into his pocket, brushing past me toward the table. Don't worry, I won't bore you with my tragic backstory. Wouldn't want to ruin the perfect picture you've painted of me. I should have let it drop. But the echo of his voice, I can't lose, lingered in my head. You don't have to pretend with me, I said quietly. He stopped, half-turned, his eyes catching mine. For a moment, the smirk faltered again, the edges of his bravado fraying. Then he shook his head, grabbed a pencil, and muttered, I don't need your pity, Winters. I told you I am not a tragic case. And just like that, the walls went back up. But I'd seen what lay behind them, and it scared me how much I wanted to see more. I couldn't afford pity, not now. I had my own deadlines, my own work to finish. The scholarship submission, the gala project. Too much was already on my plate, and Cassian was relentless, determined as ever. I needed to steel myself, push harder, keep my edge. By the fourth week, the pressure had started to crack me. I stood in the studio, brush frozen midair, staring at the same section of canvas for half an hour. Nothing felt right. Every line, every stroke of color, collapsed under my own scrutiny. The more I tried to focus, the louder the other voice hissed back. You're failing. You'll lose everything. You'll prove them right. Just then, my phone buzzed, and I already knew who it was. Mom never called at this hour unless she wanted to remind me of something. I answered, heart thudding. Jules, she said, sharp even through the static. Your father asked about the scholarship today. I told him you're still ahead, but he's worried. You're not slipping, are you? I want to tell her I was fine, that I was on top of everything as always. Instead, my voice came out raw and tight. No, not slipping. Good, she said. Because you know what this means for us, for you. We've invested too much for you to falter now. I don't want excuses. The call ended with a click. I sat there, staring at my trembling hands, a hollow ache spreading through me. Something inside cracked, and all at once I felt small, inadequate, like a kid begging to be enough, and always falling short. I didn't notice Cassian until he was right there, leaning against the table, that unreadable expression on his face. Parents, he asked quietly. I swallowed, tried to rub my eyes without him seeing. None of your business. True, he said, calm, but you look like you're about to shatter, Winters. And I've seen enough broken glass lately. I turned to glare at him, but the look wasn't mocking. It was understanding, and that broke me. Before I could stop it, a shaky laugh escaped, more sob than sound. God, I hate this. I hate feeling like no matter what I do, it's never enough. Cassian slid onto the bench beside me, close enough that our knees almost touched. Welcome to the club. We sat in silence, the hum of the studio lights filling the space. Then, hesitantly, he reached out, resting his hand over mine. Warmth spread through me. I didn't pull away. For the first time in weeks, the tight pressure in my chest eased, just a little. And sitting there with Cassian Hale, my so-called rival, I realized something terrifying. Maybe he wasn't the enemy I'd built him up to be. Maybe he was the only one who understood me. I don't know how long we sat like that. His hand on mine, my pulse finally slowing to something closer to normal. When I drew a steady breath, I found myself whispering, "You ever feel like you're just carrying someone else's dream?" Cassian leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. All the time. I turned to him, surprised by how quickly he admitted it. Really, he let out a quiet, bitter laugh. You think I wanted this? The scholarship war, the endless competition, the pressure to be better than everyone else? That's not me. That's my dad. The weight in his voice hit harder than I expected. He tilted his head toward me. Since I was a kid, it's always been, be the best or you're nothing. Doesn't matter if I like it. Doesn't matter if it breaks me. As long as I win. I thought of my own parents, the constant expectations I'd lived under. My parents are much better, I admitted, words spilling out. Everything's on me here. I'm not allowed to fail. Carrying their dreams, being their golden ticket. It's exhausting. Cassian's head snapped toward me. And for once, that signature smirk wasn't mocking. So it's not just me. No, I said, letting out a shaky breath. It's not just you. For a while, we just sat there, fragile honesty stretching between us. The tension didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt level. You know, Cassian said quietly, voice softer than I'd ever heard. I don't actually hate you, Winters. I blinked. What? Shocking, I know. His smirk was faint, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sure, you're uptight, arrogant sometimes, but you work harder than anyone else I've met here. And it pisses me off because he shook his head. Never mind. No, say it. His eyes locked on mine, sharp and unguarded. Because it makes me want to care too. And that's dangerous. I managed a small, almost disbelieving smile. You're not as much of a jerk as I thought, Cassian. Careful, Winters, he said softly, leaning just a fraction closer. Keep saying things like that, and people might think we actually like each other. And for the first time since this whole war began, I realized maybe, just maybe, we could. The next time I walked into the studio, Cassian didn't smirk or jab. He just lifted his chin in greeting, and somehow, that felt heavier than all the insults we'd traded before. We worked side by side, both pretending to be absorbed in our drafts, the silence stretched taut between us. Eventually, he broke it. You know, he said, tilting his sketchbook toward me, half of what I've been planning for this piece feels hollow. I glanced at his page, angles and geometry, all precision but no warmth. Because it is. His eyes cut to mine, but he didn't snap back. Instead, he let out a short, humorless laugh. And yours is the opposite. Too much heart, not enough structure. That stung. So what, we're both screwed? No. He finally looked at me, really looked. I'm saying, maybe we stop trying to beat each other and just, his voice dipped heavier than he intended. Work together. Relief twisted through me in a way I hadn't expected. I leaned over his sketch, sliding mine beside it. For the first time, our lines touched, Not in competition, but in possibility. Sharp edges met fluid strokes, forming something neither of us could have built alone. Hours passed like that, adjusting, teasing, debating, until we found a rhythm without noticing. Our hands brushed while reaching for the same marker. He froze. I did too. Neither of us pulled away immediately. By almost midnight, we leaned back from the table. The first draft of our merged project glowed under the lamp. My throat was raw, fingers stained with ink, but my chest felt lighter. Cassian smirked, but lacked its usual arrogance. "We're not terrible at this." "High praise from you," I said, biting back a grin. Then, he dug into his bag and pulled out a bottle of cheap champagne. I laughed at the absurdity. "What, planning to seduce me after all that teamwork?" "Please," he said, popping the cork. "I'd have to try harder than this." We drank from paper cups, the bubbles sharp and sweet. Exhaustion melted into a strange exhilaration, the kind only shared after surviving a storm together. "Funny," I murmured, leaning back against the wall. "If someone told me 3 months ago I'd be here with you, you'd have punched them," Cassian finished for me. "Exactly." He smiled, softer than I'd ever seen. His gaze lingered, tracing me in a way that made my skin prickle. I didn't look away. The silence between us pulsed with a charge no longer about rivalry. His hand shifted, brushing mine on the floor. This time, it wasn't accidental. When I looked back up, his eyes were fixed on my lips. My chest hitched before I could even think. Slowly, he leaned in, and the world narrowed until it was just us. The first contact sent a jolt straight through me, warm, deliberate, electric. I froze. Holy shit, that's what I kept thinking because I couldn't believe this was happening. Cassian Hale, the guy who'd spent months mocking me, challenging me, driving me insane, was kissing me. Really kissing me. His lips were firm, claiming mine with a confidence I'd never seen from him outside of his art. It was teasing, demanding, and impossibly intimate all at once. My hands instinctively lifted, one brushing against his shoulder, the other tangling in the back of his hair, as if anchoring myself to this impossible reality. I didn't think. I let myself melt into him, as his mouth moved over mine in ways I hadn't known I craved. His hands framed my face, thumb brushing my cheek, pulling me closer without hesitation. I pressed back, letting go of every ounce of restraint I'd been holding, surrendering to the shock and thrill of him. When we finally broke apart, breathless, he stared at me like I'd undone him. "We're screwed, Winters," he whispered. And for once, I didn't argue. I knew he was right. We were absolutely, completely screwed. The week leading up to the gala exhibition was brutal. Long nights in the studio blurred into each other, Cassian and I moving in a strange rhythm that was almost easy now. I caught myself laughing with him sometimes, and kissing each other in the midst of breaks, which felt like betrayal of a different kind, the betrayal of the walls I'd built. It was almost enough to make me forget what was at stake. Almost, till we saw a notice pinned on the board outside the dean's office. A list of registered submissions for the competition, each tagged with a short description. My stomach turned the second I saw it. One of them was mine, or should have been mine. The weight of memory, abstracted in shadows and glass. That was my proposal, my concept. But the note in parentheses, the listed stylistic influences, read like Cassian's portfolio had been photocopied onto mine. Cold shot through me. Before I could think, I turned. Cassian was already standing there, scanning the list. His expression hardened as he reached the same line. Our eyes locked. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. "You tell me," he snapped back. "Because that's your description, but my style." Heat rose in my face. "You think I do that? Steal your style of all people? I'd rather drop out." "Funny," he said, stepping closer, voice sharp enough to cut. "That's exactly what I was going to say to you." Students had started to gather, pretending not to listen, but very obviously tuning in. Whispers buzzed, the words cheating and copycat drifting like smoke around us. Cassian's jaw tightened. "If you wanted to sabotage me, Winters, you could have just done it the old-fashioned way. Not this pathetic stunt." Something in me cracked. "You think you're the victim here?" I've been drowning in rumors since the semester started, and I thought, my voice broke, anger and something sharper bubbling out. "I thought maybe for once you weren't the asshole I always believed you were." That landed like a slap. His eyes flashed, and before I knew it, we weren't just trading words. We were shoving, hands gripping shirts, fists half raised. Someone gasped as I shoved him hard into the wall. He shoved back, teeth bared. "Fine," Cassian spat. "If you want to believe the worst of me, go ahead. That's all you've ever been good at. Better than being a liar." I threw back. We stood there, chest to chest, both of us breathing hard. For a split second, I wanted to kiss him again just as much as I wanted to hit him. The confusion of it nearly choked me. But then Cassian tore away, shoving past the crowd. He didn't look back. I stood there, shaking, everyone's eyes on me, the taste of betrayal thick in my mouth. Since that day, we avoided each other like plague, and I couldn't focus on anything. My sketchbook stayed shut. My hands hovered uselessly over pencils and brushes, but all I saw was Cassian storming away. All I felt was the sharp sting of knowing I might have been stupid enough to fall for someone who was playing me. It should have been easy, slipping back into the old script, where he was the arrogant rival and I was the underdog he couldn't break. But now that script had holes. There had been too many moments of vulnerability spent together, too many kisses and conversations that didn't fit the role I'd written for him. The whispers within the department didn't help. If anything, they grew louder. Plagiarists. Cheaters. Desperate. It didn't matter that the suspicious submission wasn't signed by either of us. Everyone assumed one of us had made it happen. One night, Diego, one of our classmates, found me in the studio, staring at a blank canvas. "You look like hell," he said, sitting on the edge of the table. "Thanks," I muttered. "Want to talk about it?" "No." He was quiet for a while, then said, "You know, Mason's been acting weird lately. Real smug. Like he's already won something no one else knows about." I frowned. "Mason?" Diego shrugged. "Could be nothing. But I've seen the guy hanging around after hours near the storage rooms. He's got that guilty cat look, you know." "Listen, Jules, you both realize that you weren't the only ones in this competition, right?" My chest tightened. Cassian and I had joked about someone trying to pit us against each other, but with the gala and scholarship deadlines looming, it had never felt real. Until now. If someone was interfering, I was determined to find out. Later that week, I was in Professor Halden's office, helping arrange the preliminary portfolios for the exhibition. One piece caught my eye. The brushstrokes were heavy, angular, polished to excess, not mine. But the concept, the shadows, the broken glass imagery, was unmistakably mine, twisted into something gaudy. And the signature below froze me. Not Cassian's, not mine. My heart sank as I compared it with Mason's handwriting from previous submissions. Bingo. Just as Diego had suspected. Everything snapped into place. Cassian and I had been so focused on each other, so blind, that we hadn't noticed the real player in this game. Damn it, we'd been played. I grabbed the folders and bolted from the office, hunting Cassian down. Late that night, I found him in the studio, bent over a canvas, headphones hanging loose around his neck. Paint streaked his arms, jaw tight, teeth grinding. When his eyes lifted to meet mine, I saw the same storm I'd been feeling mirrored there. Anger, hurt, frustration. He didn't say a word. I dropped my bag and shoved the portfolio across the table. "Look at it," I said. Cassian glanced down, brow furrowing. Then his face went rigid as he flipped the page, as if checking it would change what was printed there. "Mason." The name came out like a curse. The silence between us was jagged. I leaned on the table, my voice low. All this time, we thought it was each other. But it was him. Cassian's fists clenched at his sides. He planned all this. "Yeah, and we made it easy," I said, almost to myself. He glanced at me. "What?" "We've been at each other's throats since freshman year. Of course, if something bad happened, we'd point fingers at each other first. No questions asked." Cassian's mouth pressed into a line. He didn't argue. The only sound was the scratch of his pencil again. Then he said, voice low, "Maybe we've been fighting the wrong battle all along." I let out a breath. God, we're idiots. Cassian stepped closer, shaking his head. "Yeah, we are," he said softly, then took my hands and drew me closer. "I'm sorry." And then he leaned in, lips barely brushing mine, and I froze at the heat of him so close. I pressed forward, closing the gap, and our mouths collided, soft at first, then urgent, claiming, tasting paint and salt and everything unspoken. His hands cupped my face, thumbs tracing my jaw, while mine threaded through his hair, pulling him impossibly closer. Our breaths tangled, hearts hammering, the world shrinking until there was only the press of lips and the fire between us. He pulled back just enough to murmur against my mouth, "I'm sorry for being a jerk to you all this time." And instead of replying, I pulled him down to a kiss again, reckless and wanting. And when we broke apart, breathless, Cassian's forehead pressed to mine, I knew this wasn't rivalry anymore. It was something much harder to fight. The next day, we reported our findings to the committee. Mason was called in, and the truth finally came out. He was disqualified, and my submission was revoked. Professor Halden looked at us, a small smile playing at her lips. I'm looking forward to your joint presentation, she said. Cassian and I exhaled in unison and headed straight to the studio. Within 2 days, the project was complete, our names stitched together on every sheet, every brushstroke. All that remained was the scholarship submission. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt a pit in my stomach. Cassian wasn't smiling. We stood outside the dean's office, the envelope sealed and waiting on his desk. The silence stretched until Cassian finally spoke. I'm withdrawing. The words hit like a fist. What? I gasped. He didn't look at me, hands shoved deep in his pockets, eyes on the polished floor. The scholarship's yours, Jules. I'm stepping down. I laughed, sharp and bitter. You can't be serious. After everything. After Mason's stunt. After we worked ourselves to the bone. It was never meant to be both of us, he interrupted, voice low but steady. They'll only pick one. And it should be you. I grabbed his arm, refusing to let him turn away. Don't do this. Don't play martyr. You want this as much as I do. I don't need your pity right now. Finally, he met my gaze. No arrogance. No bravado. Just raw honesty. You don't get it, he said quietly. I need my father's approval, the name, the pedigree, the money. But you need this scholarship. You've fought for it without anyone holding the door open. And you're better, Jules. I'm not pitying you. I'm admitting defeat in a fight I already knew I'd lose. Cass, my voice cracked. Why would you throw this away? Something flickered across his face, subtle, almost hidden. Because I'd rather lose the scholarship than lose you. My pulse stuttered. 8 words, and suddenly my world tilted. He stepped back before I could answer, before I could even breathe. It's done, Jules. Don't fight me on this. And just like that, he was gone, leaving me with a decision I hadn't asked for and a heart I realized wasn't mine alone anymore. I won the scholarship. Cassian stayed by my side, helping refine my work, guiding me in ways I hadn't known I needed. Somewhere along the chaos of deadlines, critiques, and stolen late-night hours in the studio, we started dating. Despite our differences, despite the rivalry that had defined us, we made it work. And I learned that sometimes winning isn't about the prize, but the person standing beside you. The end. Thanks for listening to this story. If you enjoy this story, share your enthusiasm in the comment section, and don't forget to hit the subscribe and notification buttons so you don't miss any story uploads. See you in the next one.